let me tell you the story of a game called Buckaneers.
I'm Amelia from Slam B Productions. We are a sibling-based game development company. We published Farms and Factories in 2017, and we published the expansion Inventions in 2019, and now we are working on our second major game, Buccaneers. So let me tell you a little bit about this game and how it's played. In Buccaneers, players sit down and play as 3 or 4 pirate heroes. You are on an adventure on the high seas, looking for your missing Captain Buck. And to get to him, you're gonna have to go through an entire gauntlet of monsters. So with a little bit of wit and daring, you guys can make it through, but only if you work together in this co-op, strategic, RPG-inspired board game, which can be played with 1 to 4 players.
We were inspired naturally by Dungeons & Dragons and Dungeon Delver board games like Descent or Mice and Mystics. And we also looked at games with randomizable roguelike elements, like Desktop Dungeons and One Deck Dungeon. We liked the sense of progression and the simple addition-based mechanics that encourage thoughtful play, with the risk of failure only ever a few mistakes away. But we were looking for a subtly different feeling. Not the mechanics of D&D, but the emotional connection of strategizing and emergent storytelling with your friends.
So we decided to focus on a few core elements.
Just 4 characters and a single ability choice for character creation, damage-based combat with no accuracy mechanics, and limited RNG. The simple enemy logic gave the players control over their actions, but meant that the monsters left unchecked could be very dangerous.
But enough about game design philosophy. Let's check in on the game in its current state right now. On the story tracker here, we are going to track the different combats we have to get through in order to get finally to the boss. If we defeat the boss, then we'll be able to rescue Captain Buck. The story tracker shows for each combat, what are you facing? You always fight some number of monsters, and sometimes the monsters have upgrades, which makes them even tougher. And then after that, you get some sort of reward. And whenever we have a combat, we're going to set up our initiative over here with each of our characters plus whatever monsters we have in this fight. And at times when you don't fight a monster, you get to rest. You get to finally relax, heal up your missing HP and mana, and get ready for the next gauntlet to come. Now, what about the heroes? To make things a little bit fun and to fit in with our RPG roots, we're going to start by rolling some dice to figure out our characters' names. The first character is the cook. I've got M-O-W-I-E. So we'll name the cook Maui, and to save time, I've already rolled the rest of the characters' names. And now that all the characters have a name, let's go through this character sheet a little bit. So first things first, each character has 4 stats that you can see on the left and right. Intelligence affects how much mana you have, and the 2 magical characters, the Enchantress and the Cook, both have abilities that care about how much intelligence they have. Vitality affects how many hit points you have. Dexterity affects your speed in combat as well as your ranged attack damage. Strength affects your melee attack damage and also how many items and potions you can control. On the top and the bottom of the character sheet, you have a tracker for your mana and a tracker for your hit points. Each character has a unique ability that's unique to them, but there are also 5 standard abilities. I mentioned both melee attacks and ranged attacks. So how does that work? For each hero, when it's their turn, they get to use 1 action. Those actions can come from their unique ability, one of their standard actions, or actions that they learn off of their hero deck, which they will get when they level up. When a hero does an action, they might do an attack. And attacks can come in one of 3 forms. You've got melee attacks, ranged attacks, and special attacks. Special attacks are basically everything that's not melee or ranged. So let's talk about melee and ranged. Both of those attacks have restrictions on who can be targeted when you're using them. When you're using a melee attack, then if there are any monsters engaged to you, you must target one of them. Otherwise, you can target any monster you want. Once you target a monster, you're going to do damage equal to your strength plus a battle die. The battle die has 2 zeros, 2 1s, a 2, and a 3 on it. After After a melee attack, if the monster is still alive, then that monster becomes engaged to the hero who melee attacked it. So you'll move the monster from wherever it is to the spot on the main deck with the character portrait. In this case, if the Enchantress does a melee attack, this monster becomes engaged here. For a ranged attack, unlike a melee attack, if there's any monsters engaged to you, you just can't do a ranged attack. Ranged attack a monster, you pick it, you're going to roll the battle die once again, and you'll do damage equal to the result plus your dexterity. After damaging the monster stays wherever it is. As for special attacks, that's anything that's not melee or ranged. They don't have any special rules. Instead, you should read the card that gives you an attack and see what it does. Some abilities are not actions. Instead, they are passive abilities. Passive abilities either have a trigger or happen all the time. And either way, you don't use your action to use them like you do for action abilities. Now, just like any good RPG, we're gonna have to build our characters. So we start off on the character sheet by setting each of our pointers at the lowest value. Then each player draws 3 cards from their hero deck and chooses to keep 1 as their starting ability. It's important that the heroes talk to each other and communicate and pick abilities that go together well. That's the only way you're gonna get through this whole gauntlet of monsters. So, looking at the Scoundrel's cards that he's drawn, one of them, Sweet Dreams, gives him plus dexterity, which makes his ranged attacks better. And it also says, other hero attacks deal double damage to enemies on the ship side or overboard, and your attacks deal triple damage to those enemies. That's really good with sleep, that stuns all the enemies in an area. So let's take Sweet Dreams. This way, he's making himself more dangerous by being able to do better range attacks, as well as improving everybody else. Now that we've got a lot of damage, for our last hero, the Cook, we should probably pick something a little bit more defensive. So let's pick Splendid Sauce. That will increase his intelligence, as well as give him the ability to split healing. Now that we all have our abilities picked, we've got to increase our stats. So let's talk a little bit about how combat works. So we'll flip up a monster. For example, these are gremlins. And you'll notice that the gremlins have 4 stats. They're a little bit different than how the characters work. So first off is how many of them there are. In this case, there are 6 gremlins. Second is how fast they are. These guys have 4 speed. So that means they will be faster than any heroes with 3, 2, 1, etc. speed. However, heroes always win ties. So heroes with 4 speed will go faster than the gremlins. Next is their hit points. They have 5 hit points, but remember, that's for each monster, and there's 6 of them. So you're gonna have to do 30 collective damage to all the monsters in this fight. And finally is their damage, which in this case is 1. They're not that strong. You'll notice that some monsters have special abilities. Later on, you'll face monsters with upgrades as well. Upgrades can give monsters powerful new abilities, or they can change the base stats of a monster. So when we flip up a monster, first we're gonna pick which token is gonna represent these guys. Let's use the arm with the knife, because these guys are little stabby guys. They're gonna show up on the main deck in the middle, not engaged to any hero. Then we need to set up our initiative tracker. The gremlins have a speed of 4, however, our scoundrel has a dexterity of 5. That means he's even faster than them. Unfortunately, everybody else is slower. Okay, so we've got our initiative set up and we've got our monsters laid out. Now what? So in order to decide what we should do, it's probably good to look at what the monsters are going to do. The monster turns are pretty straightforward. If they are already engaged to a hero, they're going to keep attacking that hero. And if they're engaged to nobody, they will, as a group, look for the hero with the most hit points and then all go attack that hero. So they have a tendency to sort of swarm, making it important to have a tank a lot of times. With that in mind, since the scoundrel gets to go first, thinking about the best way to help his teammates, it probably makes sense to fire off a shot and take out one of these gremlins. Remember, in order to do a ranged attack, he's going to target a monster Then he's gonna roll the battle die and add his dexterity. That's 6 plus 1 is 7 damage. These gremlins only have 5 hit points, so that one's out of the picture already. Next, it's the monster's turn. So, since they work together as a group, they will see that the cook has the most hit points, and they are going to engage the cook. So we move them to the spot on the board with the cook's icon to indicate that they're now engaged to the cook. And then the cook is going to take 1 damage for each monster. That's 5 damage total. And then it's the enchantress's turn. Looking at all of these monsters attacking the cook, even though he's at 7 hit points, so he's not doing so bad. But still, you don't want to have the monsters continue to wail on him. And taking into consideration Scruffy's ability, Sweet Dreams, the enchantress decides that it would be a great idea to put all of these monsters to sleep. So she's going to use, for her action, her ability, Sleep, from her hero card. It says, pay 2 mana, choose an area, stun all the enemies in that area. And then all of these monsters get moved onto the ship side, which is where they go when they are stunned. Now on their next turn, instead of attacking, they'll waste their whole turn moving to the main deck. Next is the first mate's turn, and just like the scoundrel, he's going to help out defensively by being on offense, which is to say, take out one of these gremlins but with an attack. He uses a melee attack, so he targets a monster, rolls the battle die, and adds his strength. That's 6 plus 2 is 8, and he takes that guy out. If the monster hadn't been defeated, it would have become engaged to the first mate. Next, it's the cook's turn. Now, unlike the scoundrel and the first mate, the cook took a much more defensive ability. He could do an attack, but it wouldn't do very much damage. And remember, the monsters are already skipping their next turn. So instead, he's going to go ahead and heal himself up, using his unique ability, Feed 'em. And just like that, we're back at the top of the turn tracker. As you can see, since the heroes work together, playing into each other's strengths and weaknesses, they were able to take out 2 gremlins before they could do too much damage, and the cook healed himself all the way up. They are in a great spot to finish this battle up, and hopefully they can keep that energy going all the way to the boss.
As an idea, Buckaneers has come a long way. It survived a global pandemic and the death of a loved one. It no longer has dry erase character sheets, or stats with decimal points, or individual weight values for items, since it turns out there is such a thing as too much math. But it still has the emotional core we set out with from the beginning, sitting down with your friends to embark on an epic adventure. Thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope you have as much fun playing the game as we had making it.